Hi, hello students. Today's lesson is going to be on wastewater and specifically what we do with wastewater and how we treat it, where we treat it, the history of wastewater, uh, the steps that are taken to go from what is known as influent, that's a vocabulary word, to effluent, another vocabulary word. You'll also get to watch a lab demonstration that I've done this week. It is posted on my YouTube channel, and it'll show you the steps that we talk about in this presentation here in a more visual model that I think will help you understand the concepts here that you need to know. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is at the top of page 8 in your notebook, go ahead and title wastewater treatment and write down your objective. Throughout this presentation, feel free to obviously pause me if you need to. I felt like this was a better way to connect with students because I know that sometimes when I'm up in front of the class presenting, a lot of students get behind. So this way you can kind of go at your own pace for those of you that are a little bit quicker than others. So this is how we're going to do it. As I go through each slide, you should be taking notes in your notebook on page 8. And again, if you need to pause me at any time, you can. So at this time, the expectation is that you have page 8 titled with the objective. So again, today you will understand what wastewater is, the importance of wastewater treatment, and you'll be able to list the steps that wastewater takes to go from influent to effluent water. So the first thing is, what is wastewater? Wastewater is really any water that has been used by humans and contaminated by humans. So this includes substances like human waste. Obviously, what we flush down the toilet is human waste. Where does that go? A lot of times, unfortunately, when we flush, we just we don't necessarily think about where it goes, but it's got to go somewhere. Remember, there are 7.8 billion people on this planet, and we are all humans, which means we all have to eat, which also means that we all have to use the bathroom. And where does all that waste go? Well, it turns into wastewater, and you're going to learn that today, where it goes and how we treat it. Also, food scraps, basically anything you put down the disposal or down the sinks, oil, soaps from your shower, any sort of chemicals that you pour down the sink. This all is considered wastewater. The other type of wastewater really are the things that we don't also think about, runoff from rain, industrial waste. When industries use water to make products, that water is contaminated and needs to be treated before it's put back into the environment. Also, water that's irrigated on crops, agricultural water. These are all types of wastewater. So for this one, the question, what is wastewater? You got to know what it is. What are some examples of wastewater? If you need to pause me, like I said, you can, but I'm going to go ahead and move on. So now that we know what wastewater is, let's look at the history of wastewater. So for thousands of years, humans had many different ways that they got rid of their waste. Predominantly, most of the ways was they just simply dug a hole and put their waste in that hole, covered it up, and that was it. But as you know, human population has increased dramatically in the last 100 years, whereas before there was not that many people on this planet, so treating wastewater wasn't necessary. So you could use things like outhouses, like this guy in the top right corner. There's still actually outhouses in use today. But the problem for many people and for many communities that used these methods was obviously the smell was a problem, but not just the smell. A lot of our waste is waste. It's contaminated. It has diseases, and if you do not treat the waste or dispose of the waste in a healthy way, then you can easily spread diseases. In fact, a lot of diseases are spread around the world simply because there's nowhere for people to put their waste. And unfortunately, for a lot of poorer countries, this is seen quite frequently, where people are getting sick because there's nowhere for their waste to go. Also, we know what groundwater is. We know that water infiltrates into the ground. I mean, just imagine putting your waste into the ground and then it raining, and that water kind of infiltrates into the ground where your waste is. I mean, you can kind of visualize what would happen there. It would pollute the groundwater. And then also the other problem, a big problem, is environmental problem. If you look at this picture down in the bottom right, you can see a wastewater effluent pipe where it's simply pumping out all this wastewater into the ocean. And for years, countries have done this. This is now illegal to do in most places around the world because scientists have studied the negative effects of discharging wastewater into the ocean. So you are no longer allowed to do that in most countries, but there are still some countries that take their waste and simply just put it in the ocean or put it in a river or a larger body of water. So I thought this was, an interesting depiction of what the history of wastewater treatment used to be like way back in the day. This is a lady sitting down on a wooden seat, and they actually had people come and just pour water, and you can clearly see what happens here. So this is like the old school style of using the bathroom, and how cultures in, the 1700s, in the 1600s would actually dispose of their waste. So I give you that to say this. You should be thankful for these right here. The fact that we don't have to go outside and dig a hole. We do not have to just, we can, what I'm trying to say is we can simply just go to the bathroom. And so understand that it is important to be thankful for that, because many cultures and in many countries, they do not have access to clean toilets for a means to get rid of their waste. Good morning, teachers. Please. Okay, so we're going to move on. So wastewater doesn't have to necessarily be wastewater all the time. We can take wastewater and turn it into clean water. Now, around the world, the majority of wastewater is not collected and is not treated or cleaned. But it's a valuable resource because, as you know, water is becoming more scarce. And so we can't just get rid of wastewater. We need to take that water, try to clean it to be able to reuse it. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but this is something that is very important, that we take what we put down the toilet, we take the water that we put down the sinks and down our showers, and we clean it so that we can reuse it. 80%, write this down, 80% of global wastewater is simply released into the environment without being treated. 80%. Now, that's worldwide. However, that number is way lower here in the United States. Here in the United States, there are still some places where wastewater is not treated and is released into the environment, but majority of it is treated, and it's treated in what is known as a wastewater treatment plant or facility. Okay, so what does our wastewater treatment facility look like? Well, here it is. Say hello to your Emerald Coast Utilities Authority wastewater treatment facility. This is what it looks like from above. This is a satellite image of the wastewater treatment plant here in Escambia County. We actually have 3 wastewater treatment facilities here in Escambia County. This one that you're looking at, is in the northern part of the county, next to kind of up near Cantonment. Uh, and this is actually this is the newest wastewater treatment facility. This one replaced the one that was downtown. And this was the largest public works project in the history of Escambia County. It opened, I believe, in 2016, so it's fairly new. And it cost you and I, the taxpayers in Escambia County, we pay for this. $316 million this treatment facility cost. Now, that's a large number. Again, you talk about something that that is really expensive and a huge project, but it's necessary. And this plant, this facility, actually can clean 22 million gallons of wastewater per day. I'll say that again. This wastewater treatment facility can clean and treat up to 22 million gallons a day. So, what normally would be, think of 22 million gallons. I mean, that is a crazy amount of water. And in other countries, that water would just get dumped into the environment untreated. But here in Escambia County, again, we should be thankful because we actually can, our wastewater gets sent here to the Emerald Coast Wastewater Treatment Facility, and it gets cleaned. Now, let's move forward. Well, why is it important? Well, we've talked a little bit about why it's important. Again, you should be taking notes on these slides, okay? And again, as I said, feel free to pause me, but I'm going to keep moving. So, why is it important? Well, number one, it helps conserve fresh water. You guys learned in the last lesson that we have a water scarcity problem. The fact that there is not a lot of fresh water on this planet. So the water that we do use, which becomes waste, we need to be able to take that and clean it to help conserve the amount of fresh water. Also, it stops the discharge of basically raw, nasty sewage putting out into the environment, into the surface water, into lakes, into rivers and stuff like that. That's not good. Number 3, you just saw that facility in Escambia County. That facility has created hundreds of jobs for our county. Now, some would say that working in a plant or a facility that treats nasty sewage water is not the best job, but it pays very well. It pays very well. Um, it also improves the health of coastal ecosystems. So think about the birds, think about the bees, think about the animals and the plants in an environment where you no longer have this nasty discharge of wastewater. It helps keep those ecosystems healthy. And like I said before, by treating wastewater, it protects us from potential diseases that are in human waste. So at this time, we have now concluded the notes part on page 8 in our notebook. We've talked about what wastewater is, a little bit about the history of wastewater. We know now where our waste goes here in Escambia County. And we know why wastewater is important, why it's important to treat wastewater. So at this time, at the top of page 9, I think it is. Yeah, page 9. Let's title this Steps of the Wastewater Treatment. Steps of Wastewater Treatment. And you should have a diagram that looks like this one that I've given you. This is for traditional students only. Remote students, you're going to continue just to take notes as you have been in your notebook. But the students that are at school, you have this handout. And I'd like you to glue this handout down on page 9 in a style that I call flip-flop, which I should have already told you about. If I have not told you what flip-flop is, please stop here and raise your hand and let me know, and I will come to you to help you. But basically, the flip-flop is where you've glued this down on page 9, just at the top of the page so that you can lift it up, because underneath this diagram is where you're going to be taking notes for the rest of this presentation. Okay, so at this time, get that glued down, and when you're ready, we can continue. Okay, so the very first, not the very first vocabulary word, but the very first thing that I want you to know about the steps and how wastewater goes from nasty wastewater to clean drinking water, you need to know the word influent. This word is influent. This is the untreated water that flows into the sewer systems to the wastewater treatment facility. You see here in this picture what what influent looks like. This is the water that is wastewater. It's disgusting, it's smelly, it's nasty, it's influent. What we want to get to is what's known as effluent water, or clean, treated water that can then be released back out into the environment. Good morning, teachers. Please. Okay, so let's write it down. Step 1. Again, you should be writing this underneath your diagram for students that are in the classroom. Students at home, we're just writing it down on page 9 in our notebook. Step 1, aeration. This word is aeration, okay? Now, what is aeration? When the influent water comes into the wastewater facility, it's, like I said earlier, it's wastewater. It is nasty, it is smelly. So the first thing that they do is they add air to the wastewater, okay? So you can see in this picture, this water is moving around, okay? And it's bubbling because they are adding air to the tank, okay, to the wastewater. Now, what this does is this promotes the growth of bacteria. Now, you might ask, why would they want bacteria to grow in this? And the answer is very simple. Typically, what's in this wastewater, as we know, is mostly human waste, right? It's feces, poop. And in that is a lot of bad bacteria, okay? That's why we get rid of it. And so they're actually promoting the growth of good bacteria to actually eat, okay, the bad bacteria. So this is important because those bacteria will eat the organic material, and a lot of it is also like scraps of food, food particles that have been thrown away. And a lot of those bacteria will eat that essentially. So they're trying to promote the growth of bacteria. This also allows the gases that are in our waste, like methane, to escape the surface. So typically, if you were standing where this person took this picture, number one, it would smell really bad, because what's happening here is you're churning up, you're like mixing around this water and pumping air into it to get it flowing, to get it moving, and to allow the gases to escape on the surface. And in the model that you're going to see in my YouTube video, I think you'll get a good understanding of what I mean by that. So step 1 is aeration, adding air to it. Let's move on to step 2. So this is a big word, coagulation. It's pronounced just like it's spelled, coagulation. This is the process by which chemicals are added so that dirt and other suspended particles stick together to form what is known as flock. Flock is a vocabulary word. These are basically clumps of dirt. So if you look at this visual, I searched the internet for a while to try and give you the best visual that I can. So you can see that these little pieces here, these particles would be, the waste. And by adding a coagulant, which is a chemical, they actually put a chemical into the water once it's been aerated. That chemical, sometimes referred to as a coagulant, makes all those nasty particles come together. And when they come together, they form flock, which are basically large clumps, again, of sediment. When this happens, okay, that flock becomes bigger and it becomes heavier. And so it sinks. It sinks down, okay, in these big holding tanks at this treatment facility, which takes us to step 3, which is sedimentation. This is the process that occurs when gravity actually will pull those denser material particles of flock to the bottom of the container. Go back. Okay, now at the bottom of the container here, so again, let's write this down. So at the bottom of the container, all right, what you have build up there at the bottom is known as sludge. And you will see a visual of this in the model that you see in just a second when you watch the YouTube video. But you got to know what sludge is. That should be highlighted. Sludge is a vocabulary word, okay? Sludge is a vocabulary word. Step 3, sedimentation. Step 4 in the wastewater treatment process is filtration. They run the water through a filter. This process removes most of the remaining particles, larger pieces, and it also filters the water to remove the impurities. So a lot of the viruses, a lot of the bad bacteria, a lot of the chemicals can actually get filtered out in this process as well. And then finally, disinfection. This is the last step in the process at the wastewater treatment facilities. And this involves adding chemicals, most of which are chlorine. Here in Escambia County, that's what we use. They actually add small amounts of chlorine to the water. This kills basically all those last little bits of harmful bacteria to the water. However, I did want to show you on the right-hand side, there is some new technology now. You know, there's been studies done that by adding chlorine to drinking water, it actually can cause cancer. And there's some negative health effects to adding chlorine to our drinking water. We will be doing our water quality testing next week in this class. You'll be actually given some water from school and you will be testing the quality of it. And you will find out if our water here from school has chlorine in it and how much chlorine it has in it. But there is some new technology out that I wanted to show you to the right here, where some treatment facilities are actually now using ultraviolet lighting. So instead of adding chlorine, essentially what they're doing is they're zapping the water with high intensity ultraviolet light. And this kills a lot of bacteria, and particularly a lot of harmful bacteria, instead of adding chlorine to the water. Step 5, disinfection. Okay, so we're almost done. Let's write this question down. Where does wastewater go when it leaves the wastewater treatment facility? Good question. So now the water has been treated. Okay, it is clean. It is no longer technically wastewater. It's now like clean wastewater or clean water, right? This is called effluent. We talked about this in the beginning. Effluent, the ending, basically, what you have at the end. This now is water that is ready to be returned to the natural environment. Now, there are 3 places really that the effluent ends up. Number 1, water towers. Okay, whenever you see a water tower, typically those water towers are full of treated wastewater. So yes, the answer to the question, so wait, Mr. Standard, you're telling me that some of the water that we drink or some of the water that comes out of our faucets or out of our showers was once wastewater? The answer is yes, absolutely. And this is a good thing because it, again, helps conserve water by treating it. The other place that it can end up is basically just a a body of water. So you can see the top right here. There is effluent pipes that do tend to lead to larger bodies of water, where basically they just pump that treated water back out into the environment. They pump it into rivers, lakes, larger bodies of water. But again, there's some serious regulations to this. Wastewater treatment facilities cannot just dump the water or dump the effluent. There's a lot of steps that they have to go through before the federal government allows them to pump this water back out into the environment. But it can. And then finally, what tends to happen in our area as well is they actually use it to irrigate crops. So they actually have these things called spray fields where they take the effluent from the treatment facility and they spray it out onto fields of grass and fields of crops and let it naturally settle. And again, that will naturally infiltrate back down and become groundwater in most places. So that's where it ends up. So we've reached the time of the presentation where you are going to watch a video. This video was done over the last couple of days. And what this video is going to show you is each of those 5 steps that we just covered. I am going to take you through each one. And I do kind of duplicate what I've talked about here in this presentation in the video, but that's fine because it's a good review for you to hear it again. But I go through each step with you to give you a better understanding of the steps that wastewater goes through. So please watch that video, okay? And make sure you like it and subscribe to the channel. And again, feedback is always good. If you feel like I could do something better, let me know. I'm cool with that, all right? So enjoy that video. So at this time, you are going to watch the video. If you need help accessing the video, let me know.